Hello, welcome to the Basketball Soapbox. I'm your host, Daniel Daly. As we wrap up this year, long year of basketball, a lot of stuff to talk about, especially over the last week. Going to be talking about how Kevin Durant's frustration in Phoenix has been picking up a little bit there. As those around the NBA have an MVP candidate down there in Oklahoma City, returning Chicago Bull at some point. The struggling play of Steph Curry over the last couple of games and a little worrisome for the Golden State Warriors. And also looking at the Detroit Pistons, who finally got a win tonight, and finally the R.J. Barrett and OG Anunoby trade that went down yesterday. So we're going to be looking off that. But first, let's kick off with the Boston Celtics here, who have been on a streak of impressive play over the last 11 games here since the in-season tournament. You got right there them beating a list of cluster of teams after the in-season tournament after dropping the game in the in-season tournament to the Indiana Pacers, who were in the finals of the in-season tournament, the first ever in-season tournament. But after that, the Boston Celtics picked up right back off, picking up a win against the New York Knicks. Obviously, the New York Knicks are always going to be tough and battleless. They also just made a trade, so I'll be talking about that later. And then we had a couple back-to-back games there with Cleveland and with Orlando, Cleveland we kind of handle a little bit there. Now, we didn't see the double bigs of Cleveland in either game with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Of course, Evan Mobley going to be out for, I believe, 8 to 10 weeks going on with surgery there. But more so looking at the Orlando side of things, Orlando has always been a thorn in our side. For whatever reason, when we go down there, they seem to just give us a hassle. And even they won the first matchup against us this year. But the Celtics handled that pretty well. So they start off that streak of 5-0. Then going out to the west side there, going out to Sacramento and laying the hammer on them, going into those couple games there against the LA teams, the Clippers, of course, without Kawhi, but we handled our business there. And then on Christmas Day, beating the Lakers, which was nice. And then in the last couple games, a dogfight between the Detroit Pistons, who were in that midst of the 27-game win losing streak. We made it 28. And at some point, it didn't look like it was going to be that, especially when we were down 21 points in that game. Ended up pulling that out. Late game heroics. Same thing with Toronto. Late game heroics. Two tough games back to back. The one game that didn't sit right with me was the Golden State Warriors game, just because of the NBA Finals. They beat us in the finals a couple years ago in 2022. And then looking at how we just have some demons in that building and just how that game we just broke down at the back end of the game, towards the end of the game, and just wasn't able to execute and get the win there. So other than that, though the games that I wanted to especially was the Orlando games because they've been playing us tough. The West Coast games, of course, that I just want to be dominant in the West Coast because that's really the first big road trip of the season for the Celtics. And then you look at the LA games, especially I want to beat the LA teams, especially the Lakers on Christmas Day. But that Golden State Warriors game we just didn't get. And of course, people are going to start complaining and look at other stuff and be like, hey, we should have got that game. We're not executing, we're shooting too many threes. But we have to be realistic here. And looking at the Boston Celtics, what they've been able to do, they're second in the league in scoring at 127 points per game, as you see there, as well as 6th in three-point shooting percentage. I think we take the most threes in the league, though, but we're 6th in field goal three-point shooting percentage, so we're hitting our threes, which is good. And another thing that I like is especially the rebounding by the Celtics, especially from Jayson Tatum, Porzingis, Jaylen Brown. Drew Holiday is getting involved in the rebounding there. And then we have Neemias Quinta off the bench, who has been picking it up, especially had a good showing on the West Coast trip, I believe around 7 and 6. 7.6 rebounds on the road there during his play. So that's good that the Celtics are actually rebounding and ending possessions on that side. Another thing that I want to point out is the assist. We're 12th in the league over the last 11 games with an assist with 27.2. We were teetering towards the lower third of the league at 20 overall on the season, but the last 11 games we've been able to build up and get to at least nearly average top half of the league. So that's a good thing for the Celtics, where it's not so much iso ball. There's a lot more ball movement. Tatum's passing. Brown is passing. Derrick White is passing. Drew Holiday. There's so many options that the Celtics have where they can create, where everybody does have a matchup that favors them, but they don't have to score every time. They can pass around, move the ball, get some other guys involved, which is definitely a good sign for the Boston Celtics moving forward, which that hasn't always been a strength in the past of the Boston Celtics in terms of moving the ball. It's been a lot of ISO play. But looking upon the last 11 games, we've been able to move the ball and get some wins there. And also rim protection from an unexpected source, who I'll be talking about in a minute, Porzingis protecting the rim there, and Derrick White, who I'm going to move on and talk about right now at this current moment. And people have been clamoring for all-star Derrick White. And at first I was kind of like, I don't know if he's going to make it. In terms of just because of the pecking order of the Boston Celtics, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, I'm pretty sure they're going to be favored in there. But when you look at the guards play out in the East, you have Damian Lillard still. People are going to look at him, especially with fan votes, especially with the Bucks record and him being a vocal point of that team. Jalen Brunson for New York. Trae Young is having an impressive season, even though his team is not winning as much. Then you got Jaylen Brown, who's probably going to be considered the forward or a guard. However, they're going to pick it out there. And just looking around, you got Darius Garland. What about Donovan Mitchell? There's a lot of guards in pecking orders, and Tyrese Maxey is also another candidate there who's a little bit more point of a vocal point in their offense. But Derrick White over the last 11 games, 20.7 points per game, 5.3 assists per game, 4 rebounds a game, 2.1 blocks as a guard. Just saying, that's impressive. That's Michael Jordan territory, Dwayne Wade territory, just guards who just got blocks in my mind. And I'm just thinking of like guards that got blocks. And I'm not saying that Derrick White is Michael Jordan or Dwayne Wade. I'm just saying in terms of blocks. And I think Eric Bledsoe used to be this way as well early in his career when he was a little bit more athletic and stuff like that. And these guys that just get blocks out of nowhere and it's off, second chance effort, third chance effort, recoveries, all the stuff from Derrick White that you're just getting all the intangibles from him. And you're also getting 1.5 steals a game, 51% shooting from the field, and 40% shooting from three. And Derrick White just does all the little things that the Celtics definitely needed, and especially when you think about what Marcus Smart brought to the table in that case. But in terms of offensive side of the ball, and what he's able to do is just a step up, especially with shooting the ball handling a little bit more, mindful of the passing, along with Jrue Holiday in the backcourt, who I'll also talk about. But looking at what Derrick White has been able to do for the Boston Celtics this season has just been impressive. And to see him take on this role, management wanted him to step up and be have a more control on the game, have a little bit more input, a little bit more involvement, and that has paid off in spades. And ever since the trade was made, we like the trade that he was brought here from San Antonio. And just to bring up his shooting, his ball handling, all the little things, all the dirty plays that he does for the Boston Celtics. And even when he shoots badly, he finds a way to impact the game, which we saw in Toronto, the Toronto game there the other night. And I was looking around thinking, and I tried to find an NBA comparison to Derrick White. And I'm sitting there thinking maybe he's a less athletic version of Shawn Marion or Andre Karolinko, Alvin Robertson, who played for the Spurs and Bucks back in the day. And I asked the group that I'm in Sit and Talk, and somebody said, C. Mills, said Ron Harper. He said some other names, but Ron Harper was the guy that stuck out to me because I'm like, he's not as athletic as Ron Harper, but in terms of what he's able to do, in terms of being able to run an offense, being able to score, being able to play defense the way he is, being able to block shots, get steals. Ron Harper was that type of player. Some other people said Manu Ginobili, and I was like, nah, Manu Ginobili is too herky-jerky. But we landed on Ron Harper, who played for Cleveland, then went to LA, and of course won championships with the Bulls. And it was just tough finding a comparison. I felt like that was the right one to go with because I just felt like those kind of align where it's not, and especially when Ron Harper was in Cleveland behind Mark Price and Brad Daugherty, you're not sitting there looking at him as the main scorer, but he was another guy in that option with those two guys when they ran their pick and roll that can create, guard, still fill in, still create on the offensive end, play hard defense, guard the best player on the defensive end, especially for that Cleveland team. And that's when I think about Derrick White. I don't know if he's an all-star. He's playing like it. But in terms of his role on the team behind Brown and Tatum and Porzingis, you can even say he's probably the third option in that just because of the impact that he has on the game over the course of the game and his fingerprints all over the game. And just paying kudos to Derrick White and his play, stepping up, being stellar. And I don't know if anybody saw this coming. We saw creeps of it, and especially just building off his run last year, especially with that tip hit against Miami to force a Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. And just looking at Derrick White is just impressive, and he's been impressive. And if the Celtics have the best record heading into the All-Star break, I wouldn't be surprised. Excuse me. I wouldn't be surprised if Derrick White gets some All-Star consideration, especially the way he's playing. The point output, the creation output, the defensive side of the ball, and the efficiency. It's going to be hard to keep him out of the All-Star game if he continues to play like this. Let's move on to Jaylen Brown over the last 11 games, 24.3 points per game, 4.6 assists per game, 4.9 rebounds on 50% shooting from the field and 38% shooting from the three. And, of course, everybody came into this season questioning Jaylen Brown's contract. That was the big naming thing. Everybody was like, you can't let him walk, but do you want to pay him max money? All this other stuff. And, of course, the start of the season kind of started out slow, trying to find his way into the offense and kind of try to put his foot on the pedal there. And playing with the additions of Jrue Holiday, playing with the additions of Kristaps Porzingis, who he has a nice little two-man game with, which kind of bumped up Jaylen Brown's assist a little bit. Jaylen Brown has answered the call in that recent stretch of play here, playing really well, being aggressive, and especially in that Toronto game where Jayson Tatum was out, Kristaps Porzingis was out, Al Horford was out. All our usual suspects over the course of the season were out. He stepped up, and that's what you paid him to do, right? You expect him to be a secondary scorer. On some nights, he's going to be the number one option, just because he's behind Jayson Tatum in the pecking order a little bit. But you have two guys that can go get buckets, and Jaylen Brown has been able to do that. Turnovers aren't as erratic as it usually was in past that people have been creating. He's been going left. So all these little things that people have criticized, and it's like, well, in the web of the Boston Celtics, Jaylen Brown's playing his role perfectly. He's shooting well from the field. He's being efficient. He's guarding. And we have to stop trying to find something to nitpick with these guys. As they're one of the better teams in the league. They're one of the top. They're in top 5 on offense and defense, with guys playing really well, and especially with the impressive play of Derrick White, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Jrue Holiday, who I'll get into in these guys in a little bit. But the way that people have tried to criticize and beat up Jaylen Brown, I feel like he's gotten that out of his head, and now he's just playing basketball. And it's very, very, very good to see, and it's paying dividends. And when the Celtics are clicking like this, you have a starting 5 that's playing really well, and Jaylen Brown's a part of it. It's always good. And I don't think people should continue to nitpick. Obviously, there's going to be a question of what's going to happen during the postseason. But right now, I just want the Celtics to continue to build, and Jaylen Brown has been tremendously part of that moving forward. And, of course, going back to Celtics fans who keep trying to nitpick, Jayson Tatum, there was a report on Instagram, I think it was from – I don't know if it was Celtics Media or CLNS. I believe that's the sportscasting for the Boston Celtics. I can't remember the clip, but somebody was just sitting there saying everyone else is playing well, but it seems like Jayson Tatum's regressing and all this other stuff. And people are just basically complaining about how he's shooting and how he's not being as efficient. Stop. The Celtics are winning. Let's just get that out the way. First of all, the Celtics are winning. They're 10-1 in their last 11 games. They have the best record in the NBA at, I believe, 25-6. And looking at the rest of the league, where the Eastern Conference is, where Milwaukee is struggling with their defensive side of the ball, at least for those things, especially with Damian Lillard integrating him, trying to find Chris Middleton, getting his footing back. Cleveland in disarray, especially with all the rumblings of Donovan Mitchell trying to leave. Injuries to Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. Orlando is a young, pesky team moving up. New York Knicks just making a trade, who we'll talk about at some point. The Indiana Pacers have been struggling after the in-season tournament. Everybody needs to chill out. Now, if Jayson Tatum was being aggressive and playing like shit and not impacting the game, then I would be like, all right, patience. He's fucking up. But the one thing that you want a superstar to do. If their shot is not falling, find another way to impact the game. He's doing that defensively. He's doing that moving the ball, passing the ball, rebounding the ball, finding other ways to impact the game. And he's still the leading scorer of the Boston Celtics at 25.7 points per game. So if people are going to try to sit here and nitpick and be like, oh, well, he's not playing like a Luka, or he's not playing like an SGA or a Joker or anything like that, Jayson Tatum is Jayson Tatum. He's not those guys. Those guys play a different style of game than Jayson Tatum is. Jayson Tatum is a scorer. He's finding his playmaking ability. He's hitting the boards. He's playing good defense, and he's leading the Boston Celtics. And when his shot's not falling, he's finding other ways to impact the game. I don't necessarily know if you can say that about everybody else in the league who's considered a superstar, where they make other things happen. If Luka's not scoring, it's pretty tough. Yes, he can play making stuff like that, but that's not going to happen. Joker can do that. He finds other ways to impact the game. SGA, of course, both sides of the ball, and I'll be talking about him later. But Jayson Tatum is finding other ways to impact the game for the Boston Celtics. And I think that's something that you wouldn't have said a couple of years ago where, yeah, you have the defense and stuff like that, but it's like, can you get that playmaking in your game? And I think that we've seen it over the course of this season, a little bit of last season, but he's picking it up this season where other guys are filling in that void and stepping up and scoring on their end. So looking at what Jayson Tatum's bringing to the table, everyone chill out. Everyone chill out. Stop all this stuff about trying to crap on Jayson Tatum. The Boston Celtics are the best in the league with him not playing the best in terms of shooting the basketball. His three ball just needs to go up. That's pretty much what it really is. He's shooting abysmal from three, but he's getting to the line. He's scoring. He's rebounding. He's passing. Leave Jayson Tatum alone. Like, stop all this nonsense of this little chatter and trying to find friction within the Boston Celtics because we have to nitpick. Now, if there's anything I need to nitpick, is just finding another scorer off the bench. Peyton Pritchard has been playing well. Sam Hauser has been shooting the ball well. Al Horford has been good in the reserve role. I don't like when he starts, but in the reserve role, he's been pretty good. Neemias Quinta has stepped up. Luke Cornett had 20 and 8 the other night against the Toronto Raptors. But I just want a consistent score off the bench, and that's what I've been trying to see. O'Shea Brissett and Banton. We're looking at those guys. I'm trying to see who's going to step up between those two. But as far as the Boston Celtics go, that's the only question mark I have for this team. They play defense really well. They play offense pretty well. They're shooting the three ball pretty well. Kristaps Porzingis has looked great. 23 points per game, 8 rebounds, and nearly 2 blocks a game for Kristaps Porzingis on good shooting splits. Drew Holiday at nearly at 15 points per game, nearly 4 assists a game, and shooting on 50-50 splits from the field. So you're getting this type of efficiency from nearly everybody on the field. Once Jayson Tatum starts clicking, it's going to get scary for the league. And I don't know if somebody can stop us. I don't know if anybody's going to stop the Boston Celtics if they can continue to go on this pace. And then if we add somebody at the trade deadline, buyout market that can impact this team off the bench, it's going to get scary. It's going to be the Boston Celtics to lose, and I already feel like that. But let's see how the season continues to progress. But Boston Celtics fans, enjoy the ride. Stop trying to find something wrong. Of course, people are going to nitpick after three. That's just what this era is. People are going to sit there and be like, oh, the people shoot too many threes. The league shoots threes. Let's just understand what that is. But overall, stop nitpicking on Jaylen Brown. Stop nitpicking on Jayson Tatum. These guys are leading the Boston Celtics. And enjoy the ride. They're number one in the Eastern Conference. We're playing really well. And if we can just find another guy off the bench, I'll feel even more confident about the Boston Celtics and their championship aspirations in June. Don't need that up. But let's move on to... I lost my pen here. I had a pen. Lost my pen. Lost my train of thought. Sorry about that, everyone. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as we continue here on the Basketball Soapbox. Moving on to Kevin Durant, frustration in Phoenix. Woj came out on Christmas Day basically alluding to the frustrations that Kevin Durant allegedly has with the Phoenix Suns in just terms of not everything going right, the moves that they've been able to make, especially in the minimum deal market, the Grayson Adams, the Yuta Wanabe's, all those guys that haven't really panned out, even though Grayson Allen's really shooting the ball. I just want to talk about additions that the Suns made. And especially with the Bradley Beal injury, he's been out. He just recently came back. But Kevin Durant's frustration in Phoenix, I kind of understand it, but I don't on the back end, because when he came there, Now, I understand the Kevin Durant trade. It's Kevin Durant, top 15 player all time, one of the best scorers ever in the league, ever. At the small forward position, probably the best scorer, not total wise, but in terms of efficiency, being able to score from everywhere on the floor. And Kevin Durant's doing that this season, nearly 30 points per game, 6 assists a game, getting the playmaking the past couple of games, 6.3 rebounds, 50, 40, nearly 90 splits, nearly 50-50, 90 splits at what, 34, 35 years old for Kevin Durant. And it's just impressive. Automatically, first of all, a Hall of Famer. We know what he brings to the table. And I understand the Kevin Durant trade, that you make that trade just because it's Kevin Durant, of course. And I was always hesitant because I was like, Booker got something with Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. I felt like they were building a nice rapport. And to see that just gone, that's one thing. You bring in Kevin Durant, okay. Then they move DeAndre Ayton, who was a big man, had the issues with Monty Williams. I understand that. Moving that. Then they make the trade for Bradley Beal, which people didn't like. And I'm like, okay, but it's like, I feel like the trade for Ayton was the part that kind of hurt them more than making the Bradley Beal trade. Because now they have no interior defense. They have no big man. They have no way to grab rebounds. It's a lot more tougher on Kevin Durant. He has to be the front line defense now. I believe with Me Too and all of that. And it's like, that's not what Kevin Durant wants to do at this stage of the game. At his age, right? Like, that's not what you want that's not what you brought Kevin Durant here to play frontline defense. It's been impressive. Of course, we saw that with the Golden State Warriors and stuff like that. But in terms of what that is, Yusuf Nurkic has been solid for the Phoenix Suns, has been a good positive addition there. But in terms of defensively, no, that's just not going to happen for him on that side of the ball. But to depend on Kevin Durant that much, having to make all these rotations, now he's having to play point guard. Him and Booker have been out. It's tough, and it's tough, and I understand that. And Kevin Durant went back at Woj and said all these people are lying and deleted a tweet, basically denying the rumors that he's frustrated. And all these leaks come out and stuff like that. But it's like, this is this is Woj who said this. Like, right? Like, I'm pretty sure the information is not going to be false when it comes to Woj, right? Like, Woj has a good track record, long track record of just being able to be an NBA insider for years. So I doubt that anything that Woj has said is incorrect. That's the first thing. But looking at what this Phoenix Suns team is at this point, 16-15, ninth out in the Western Conference. Bradley Beal has only played 7 games. They're 1-1 with the big three altogether. So that's frustrating. Nearly 31 games. And you've only played 2 games with your big three. That's tough. And especially in the Western Conference where Minnesota's taking off, Denver's taking off, OKC's taking off. You're trying to see if Sacramento can find their footing. The Golden State Warriors are struggling, who I'll be also talking about at some point. But looking at the Western Conference here, as I pull it up, the Clippers are clicking, especially. I think that they have had a weak schedule, and now they're going to be good, but they have had a weak schedule. And that's the one thing I've said, that they've had, I believe, the 4th weakest schedule in the league, the Clippers have. So we'll talk about them on another day. But they're pulling it together, especially with James Harden after those first abysmal, I believe, 5 games that they had with him. And then you got the Dallas Mavericks, of course, led by Luka Doncic. He's just going to guide them to wins with his play style. We'll see if whatever that happens in the playoffs. We'll see if Kyrie comes back. The Pelicans, who no one really trusts, because it's just like, you don't know what Zion's going to bring night to night. You don't know where this team is going to go. And especially, it's been so herky-jerky. Even though they're above 500, it's just tough right now to look at them. The Lakers, they're always a threat to make a move. Houston's playing really well out there. So there's a battle out in the Western Conference. That's 10 teams that I talked about that are out there in the Western Conference. And the Suns are 9th, or 8th right now out of that. They are, 16-15 still, with the Lakers lost tonight. So to look at what the Phoenix Suns are doing, it's just like, can they get on the court? And you kind of look at that with the Clippers, where there's just like, can these guys get on the court? Can they build some chemistry together? Playing 2 games with your big three. Of course, Bradley Beal came back after that back injury, his nagging back, and came back, and then all of a sudden just sprained his ankle randomly in the game off a jump shot. So that's really tough to continuously keep battling, pushing back and forth between these 3 guys, where you're depending on this guy to fill up the scoring, especially at the guard position. and be able to facilitate, create for the offense. So that's tough to just put on all Kevin Durant and Devin Booker at this point. And all the guys have been injured at some point variation of this season. So that's been tough. So to see Kevin Durant still out here, still trying to put on a show, play point guard, be frontline defense at this stage of his career at 35 years old, and still to be as efficient as he is, to still be as good as he is. These guys, him, LeBron, Curry, of course, just playing fantastic into old age. But to put all that on Kevin Durant right now, and especially so early in the season, that's tough. So it's been tough for them to make moves because of just the salary cap restrictions that they can have. I don't even know if they can make a buyout move. But it's going to be hard to if they can trade anybody. I don't think they can. I don't think they have any assets. They traded all the picks. So looking at it from that standpoint, the Phoenix, this is it. They got to figure it out. And hopefully it doesn't push Kevin Durant to the point where he, at worst case scenario, injury. And definitely don't want that with Kevin Durant, especially in the Western Conference. Like, this is probably the most talented top teams in the West. Like, you're looking at how stacked it is and how much of a dogfight it is. So losing a guy, even for a game, especially with Bradley Beal, who's missed 24 games on the season, that's tough. Like, and you're just hoping at some point that these guys can get it together now over the course of the season and try to put it together, man. Because Kevin Durant, he's playing fantastic. And if there is frustration, I understand it. But on the other side, it's like, you guys kind of have to make this work, especially with the trades that happened, all the assets given up, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, all these guys that were given up, in those trades. You have to find a way to make it work. Especially at this stage of your career. Of course, people are going to trade for Kevin Durant, but it's like, how many assets are you going to give up to continue trading for Kevin Durant if it's going to end in frustration? Something to think about. But let's move on to around the NBA. Some other interesting stuff happening around the NBA. Looking at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander out there for the OKC Thunder, playing absolutely fantastic. 31.4 points per game, 6.3 assists, 5.7 rebounds, and leading the league in steals at 2.7 a game. The OKC Thunder are currently 21-9. That's second out west. I believe they have fifth best record in the league. OKC, people had joked. There was a couple people with predictions saying that they can be fourth. They can be a top seed in the Western Conference. And people were like, oh, slow down. And especially with the way that Jalen Williams is playing for them. Chet Holmgren, who is obviously going to be in the Rookie of the Year conversation, especially with this team. And SGA leading the charge, especially with the Doc Rivers on KG Certified podcast that came out this week, especially looking at SGA, looking at it from that standpoint and seeing how he was like, SGA is going to be a star. Of course, he was like, you make the trade because it's Kawhi Leonard, but he was like, damn, I wanted to keep SGA because he knew that he was going to be needed. And especially at the point where the Clippers do need a point guard and then eventually made that trade for getting Russell Westbrook and then trading for James Harden. It's like they had SGA. Who knows how things would have been clicking with that team, and especially defensively, SGA, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. That would have been something, man. That would have been something. But you got guys like Lorenzo Dort that is playing really well, shooting the ball really well, playing both sides of the ball. Jalen Williams, who I really like, who's been out of nowhere just stepped up in this big role and has just been impactful for the OKC Thunder. So looking at that. And then led by SGA, you're getting this production from Chet Holmgren as well, who was at 17 points per game, nearly 3 blocks, and has just been fantastic shooting the ball and has been transitioning to the league really well and has been playing Joker really well. In the past couple matchups, they have dominated the Denver Nuggets. So that's something to look out for. But SGA, I cannot talk enough about him. He should be in the MVP candidate conversation. And just the way he's playing, 30 points per game. That's tough. And he's not doing it much on outside shots. He only takes around 3.5 a game. So you're looking at that from that standpoint of what he's bringing to the table. And just to get this type of play, I can say right now he's better than James Harden. I know some people who hold on to James Harden a little bit more just because of what he's done in Houston and stuff like that. But at this point today, if the Clippers could have had SGA over James Harden, they would have done it because it would have fixed all their problems, especially how he plays the game, especially how he gets to the bucket. That would have opened up things for everybody. But man, that's crazy. And he should be an MVP candidacy, no question. Looking at SGA for the OKC Thunder. And OKC Thunder are second out west, as I said, fifth in offense, third in defense. And that starts with SGA because he's playing both sides of the ball. He's scoring efficiently and leading the league in steals. He's doing it on both ends. And it's not no hogwash type of defense where it's like he's just playing the passing lanes. Nope, he's ripping people and getting the ball. That's what he's doing. He's killing them. He's killing them out there, man. He's killing them. But let's move on to some other positive news, especially for the Chicago Bulls standpoint. Lonzo Ball is pain free. Last game that he played since January 14th, 2022, when he tore his meniscus in 2022. And it's just been a long, treacherous time for Lonzo Ball. That's 2 seasons without Lonzo Ball due to this meniscus tear and just knee injuries and stuff like that. And he had all those ankle sprains, with especially early in his career and stuff like that. And looking at what Lonzo Ball was doing for the Chicago Bulls at that time, leading the charge with Alex Caruso, shooting the ball really well, especially from 3. And it's like the Chicago Bulls were at some point 1 seed in the Eastern Conference during that year. So you're looking at that standpoint and the impact that Lonzo Ball had as a basketball player. And not having him in the league kind of sucks. I'm not gonna lie. Well, I enjoyed watching the Bulls play, especially with Lonzo and Alex Caruso fucking shit up defensively, just ravaging defenses and being able to spot up and shoot the ball, and just seeing after all that stuff that happened in LA where he was kind of ousted and stuff like that, goes to the Pelicans, which was weird that he left there because it's like I felt like that would have been a good combo with him and Zion, especially passing the ball, lob threat, all that there. Bring it to the Pelicans, and it just didn't work out there. Goes to Chicago, find his footing. The noise is off him. He has DeMar DeRozan there to kind of take the pressure off him. It's not all this noise around Lonzo and his father and all that stuff like that. And to just see all this type of stuff that's happening, you heard the setbacks, the arguments that he got into with Stephen A, where he was like, they were saying he couldn't get out of a chair. So to hear all these reports where it's like he had cartilage transplant in that knee, and you just hearing all this stuff, and he had to go on video and act like he was standing out of the chair and all that stuff, and it was just a bad look. And I'm just like, damn, he doesn't need to be doing that. But now just to hear that he's finally picking back up basketball activities and going to be running, it's like, damn, now he's only starting to run. So looking at it from that standpoint, it's like, damn. But looking at the fact that he's actually pain-free, it looks like he's going to be heading back to the basketball court at some point. I don't know if it's going to be this season, especially now just starting to run. But if he's able to pick it up for the Chicago Bulls, wherever they're at, their state, I don't know if they're going to trade him in terms of where they are. Zach LaVine chatter picking up. The Bulls have been playing well, especially with Kobe White leading the charge there at point guard. But looking at it from the Chicago Bulls standpoint, if Lonzo Ball is healthy and able to play, that's good for them. And that's good for Lonzo. It's good that he's going to be back in the NBA at some point, hopefully in the near future, playing basketball and being in the league and seeing his passes and seeing his style of play and seeing him pick it back up on defensively. And hopefully he's able to just have a speedy recovery and make his way back to the court. That's what we want for Lonzo Ball, especially as an NBA fan. So hopefully he's able to come back. Now, looking at the Golden State Warriors, who have been struggling, especially all that situation with Draymond Green being suspended a couple weeks ago. Klay Thompson been struggling to shoot the ball, and now it seems like it has drifted off to the other guy, Steph Curry here, who in the last 4 games, only 20.8 points per game, 38% shooting from the field, 30% from 3. That's not Steph Curry. That's not what we're used to. That's not what we're used to seeing, and just seeing his production, because one thing that the Warriors have always been, especially with Steph Curry, we've been able to see his efficiency. We've been able to see his scoring output. We've been able to see Steph Curry play at a level that is just superstar level. And even though this is the last 4 games, this is a different territory for the Golden State Warriors, right? Like, they're not in playoff contention. They're not in playoff contention. They're under 500. Klay Thompson is struggling. Andrew Wiggins has been relegated to the bench potentially in trade talks at this moment. They finally made the switch to Jonathan Kuminga, which I felt like they should have done. And if they're going to move on from Andrew Wiggins, make it happen. At some point, you got to figure it out. Maybe send him to Canada. Andrew Wiggins, send him to Canada and pair him with RJ Barrett, who I'll be talking about. 2 Canada boys, let them figure that out. But looking at what it is, they've been able to get some good play out of Trice Jackson-Davis, who has been having a couple good games, kind of like the quintet for the Boston Celtics, but playing a big role there, especially with Kevon Looney. I don't know what's going on with him. He's been in and out of their lineup and just hasn't been playing as much. Maybe he's another trade bait guy that they're trying to move on from. But looking at Steph Curry, looking at the Warriors, they're 5-5 in the last 10 games, 11th out west, under 500. Curry is struggling. Steph Curry is struggling. We don't really see that. Even the years when they were struggling and stuff like that with Draymond Green was out and Klay tore his ACL and stuff like that, Steph Curry was able to be that consistent driving force. And it's wearing down on him. You can see it right now. It's wearing down on Steve Kerr as well. It's just wearing down on the Warriors, and everybody can feel this void. And it's like at 35 years old, Steph Curry is going to have to figure out a way to get back, get going, rejuvenate himself a little bit here in the season, because there's still a long way to go. There's still a long way to go. They've only played 32 games. They've only played 32 games on the season. There's still more games to go. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Golden State Warriors via trade, what they're going to do with Draymond, especially when he returns, what the situation with Klay Thompson is, because now it's at a point where Klay Thompson had a little surge there where he was looking good, but then he shot poorly again tonight. So you're looking at it and it's like, can this get better? Can the Golden State Warriors find another resource, another avenue to get back to their style of play, get back to what they were? Because they lost 132 to 122 to the Mavericks tonight. And it's like they're trying to find it, and it's just like, I don't know if it's on this roster right now. And people have floated out some trade rumors that they can go get Lauri Markkanen. They can go get Pascal Siakam from Toronto. And it's just like they need to figure it out, because Chris Paul has been a nice secondary playmaker for them, but they need something else. Chris Paul at what, 38 years old, about to be 39 years old. It's like they got to find something. They got to find some other resource. They're trying to use their young guys right now, which I think is long overdue. But looking at the Golden State Warriors, it's just like, man, Steph Curry needs some help. And I don't know if his splash brother in part can do it on the level that the Golden State Warriors need, that Steph Curry needs at this point in time in his career. I just don't know. But let's move on to the Detroit Pistons. Any hope on the horizon? Finally snapping their 28-game losing streak, right? Like they thought they had it against the Boston Celtics up 21, blew that game. And maybe they got a little help, especially with the trade that I'm going to talk about after this. A little help from the Toronto Raptors trading OG Anunoby and others, Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa. Maybe that helped because they finally got the win here tonight, winning 129-127 against the Toronto Raptors, snapping their 28-game losing streak, which everybody was making a big deal out of. And I'm just like, and people around the league have said, hey, Monty Williams is a bad coach and stuff like that. And I'm like, and not playing Jaden Ivey and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that has to be an organizational thing. Because no way that the management organization is going to sit there and say Jaden Ivey shouldn't be playing. That they only stepped in recently after all these games, 28-game losing streak, in the midst of this, and not have Jaden Ivey on the floor. They were playing Killian Hayes, weird lineups, especially with the double bigs. All the stuff happening in Detroit, and I'm like, only now they're stepping in. But Detroit has been playing hard basketball, and in terms of tough basketball. And then in terms of being 2-13, they recently just got a win here today, but 2-13 in games decided by 5 points or less, they're in ball games. So it's just figuring out as a young team, trying to figure out how to close, not work these dumbass lineups. And hopefully the Detroit Pistons are turning the corner here, because Uh, losing 28 games in a row. I remember the Celtics losing 18 in a row, or I believe it was 18 in a row in the 2007 season. I remember that. That was miserable. I watched every game. It was tough. So to see the Detroit Pistons finally get a win, that's good for them. Wingstop was handing out 5 free wings if they won a game and stuff like that. They have to do promotions like that and stuff like that. That's tough for the city of Detroit, and they deserve better because, especially with the Bad Boys, and then you had the 2004 team and those constant Eastern Conference Finals appearances. It's a long way removed from that. And the last playoff appearance was with Blake Griffin. I believe that was 2015. But it's just, that's tough, man. Detroit, they deserve better. I like a lot of guys on their team. One of the Thompson twins, I always mess up their names. Cade Cunningham, Jaylen Brown, Isaiah Stewart, Jaden Ivey. So there's guys that I like on their team, and I feel like they have a nice young nucleus. And I had them kind of sneaking for a playing spot. I thought they were going to be in position to battle for that, especially with the play last year. And then seeing Cade Cunningham coming back from injury, I thought that was going to be a boost. And he's been playing really well for them over the last 6 games, 32.5 points per game and nearly 10 assists. So seeing your guy being the number one, trying to will this team to at least a win, that's tough, man. And it's just I'm just happy that they got a win, because it's like they got that out the way. And hopefully that doesn't start another crazy streak. They go on another 28-game losing streak. Hopefully that doesn't happen for the Detroit Pistons. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And hopefully they're able to string some wins, maybe lose 5 here, win a game here, and get out of that worst record territory. Get to at least 18 wins or 15, 18 wins. Please do it. Please. That's all we're asking for as NBA fans. I don't want the stench of the Detroit Pistons to be, and especially with Cade Cunningham and just all that losing and stuff like that. Nah, he doesn't deserve that. He's playing his heart out. Those guys are playing tough, and especially in close games. Hopefully they're able to figure out in close games. They're playing Jaden Ivey more. Hopefully they're heading in the right direction. We'll see what happens with Isaiah Stewart. People have been floating him to the Celtics, floating him to OKC, other teams like that. So going to be interested to see where the Detroit Pistons go, and hopefully it's on the up. Obviously, probably going to be tanking for a lottery spot, but they can be better than what they are. All right, let's move on to NBA trade. First NBA trade of the season. Let me just write down my timestamp since that's not working right now. So give me a minute here. Knicks trade R.J. Barrett to the Raptors for OG Anunoby. Raptors get R.J. Barrett, Emmanuel quickly in the second-round pick. And now to think about where Toronto was just last season, right? There were reports that Memphis offered 4 first-round picks to go get OG Anunoby, and Toronto said no. So to look at what – I thought that was a misstep on the Toronto Raptors part, because if you can get that all for OG Anunoby, and I felt like that would have worked out well for Memphis, a guy that could shoot the ball and play defense, and especially now that they're missing Dillon Brooks, who has been playing well for Houston. I thought that would have been a good pairing, at least for Memphis. So to sit there and look at it afterthought, I thought that would have been a good trade for the Memphis Grizzlies just a year ago. But looking at the Toronto Raptors, who could have got all these assets for them, and now just having a second-round pick, they did get 2 players in here. But looking at it from that standpoint, it's just like, the fallen assets, especially after the Rudy Gobert trade, you figure that would have been the best time to make that type of move and hit the iron when it's hot, especially in Toronto, where they weren't really doing much. So looking at it from the Knicks side of things, they get OG Anunoby, Malachi Flynn, Precious Achiuwa. And looking at it from their standpoint of, one, I thought it was good that they got a big in Precious Achiuwa, because Mitchell Robinson's out with that ankle surgery. He's going to be out for a little while. So they needed a big. They needed somebody who can play forward, play big, play center. But I think for the Knicks especially, let's start with R.J. Barrett. Let me go back to that. R.J. Barrett going to the Toronto Raptors, especially with Emmanuel quickly. I feel like that's a good thing for the Toronto Raptors in that retrospective, where this trade kind of works for both sides, and you can kind of see the development of what ideas they were thinking. First of all, RJ Barrett's already under contract, probably at a cheaper price than what they would have to pay OG Anunoby just because of the way the salary cap works. I believe RJ Barrett's around 27, 29 million for the next couple of years. He just signed that 4-year deal last season for 120 million. So he didn't even get out of the first year of the deal. So looking at it from that standpoint, but at least you have a set number for a player that you could potentially use. And especially with RJ Barrett's play style versus what OG Anunoby does, he's another creator, another ball handler. And especially if you're looking to pair somebody with Scotty Barnes, who seems to be taking the charge there, you're going to need somebody on the perimeter, another guy that can go get you roughly 20 points a game. RJ Barrett's at 18 points per game this season. So you're looking at that and just hoping that his efficiency picks up, because I think that was the main thing that, especially with New York, that they desperately just needed some more guy who's just a little bit more efficiency, especially shooting the ball. So looking at it from that standpoint for Toronto, they're getting a guy who's already under contract. They know what he is. Emmanuel Quickly, I believe he's up for contract extension. So you get a little flyer on him and see what he's able to do and give him some run there, because Dennis Schroeder has been the starting point guard. And you're looking to just start this over with a younger nucleus, right? You got Dennis Schroeder, who's also on that team, Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam. So it's kind of like the old guard of the Toronto Raptors kind of staying around. And it's like that doesn't fit the trajectory of what Toronto is moving forward with Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, who they drafted at 13 this year. So it's looked like there's a changing of the guard here where they're getting a couple of those older guys out. And now you look at Toronto, that opens up the door for Pascal Siakam. I saw a report that they said there's no traction as yet. They're just now getting feelers out there and trying to get offers. Who's older? He was part of that 2019 championship team and looking for a big contract. So now that you know that you don't have to pay OG Anunoby, you already have RJ Barrett under contract, that kind of opens up the floodgates for them to potentially trade Pascal Siakam, who's been tied. People have said to the Warriors. People have said other teams as well. And you look at what that could potentially mean for Jakob Poeltl, who's a big that they can get assets for around the league. I'm thinking Memphis, especially, who has been just drained for bigs in terms of Steven Adams and Brandon Clark being injured. Looking at Oklahoma City, looking to pair big with Chet Holmgren. So that kind of potentially opens the door there for some avenues where Toronto can continue to build assets, get younger players, get solid contracts either expiring, continue to flip those, figure out what asset building, especially with Masai Ujiri there. So it's looking interesting for the Toronto Raptors, at least now starting to hit the rebuild, especially after Kawhi left. Kyle Lowry was traded, all that stuff there. And I felt like this should have happened a lot sooner, where they could have got some different assets and been a little bit more towards the bottom and figured out what they were doing towards going forward, especially with Scotty Barnes, who looks like he's taking another level of his game, shooting the ball a little bit more from the outside and playmaking and doing all these other things with Scotty Barnes. He's a little dynamo that they drafted high, and it's like they want to see what he is. And especially with Grady Dick trying to figure out what he is, because he hasn't really been able to get some time here. So it's going to be interesting to see what avenue the Toronto Raptors move with this rebuild here and finally hitting the button. And they've been one of the teams that said, hey, they have to rebuild. Chicago, I've said they have to rebuild. So Toronto finally hitting that button and getting this trade. Now, looking at it from the Knicks point, where they get OG Anunoby, who's just a better fit right now for the New York Knicks, right? RJ Barrett was nearly a 20-point per game scorer on not the greatest efficiency as a guard. But now you're getting somebody who doesn't really need the ball in his hands, more of a catch-and-shoot player and spreading the floor for Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. So you're getting some guys that when those guys come in, the attention, creating, dishing, getting double-teamed in terms of driving to the paint, looking to score. Now you got a guy that can knock down the shot at 37% from the field. He's 15-point game scorer, but he doesn't need the ball in his hand. Kind of fits that Josh Hart mold. And you're getting that another guy like that for the Knicks, for Tibbs, who's probably going to do some funky lineups now, because now maybe they can play a little bit smaller, especially with Julius Randle. Maybe even run Julius Randle at center in certain lineups and certain things like that. And you probably don't want to do that because defensively and stuff like that, you're going to be worried. But the way the Knicks play and how gritty they are and how those guards are going to get after it, maybe they can survive even with that little lineup. Precious Achiuwa is added to that. Malachi Finn's probably going to see some backup role there at point. going to be interesting to the Knicks, but the Knicks probably going to extend OG Anunoby, and it looks like that's a smart thing. It just fits, especially with Brunson and Julius Randle, and especially what I said in the point where those guys are going to be commanding so much attention. Leaving OG Anunoby, I still remember the corner three he hit against the Celtics in the bubble to end the game. I believe that was game 2. Looking at it from that standpoint, so looking at what he's going to be able to bring to the table, I think that's just a better fit. And for once, Tibbs modernizing his offense, adding more shooting and spacing on the floor, opening it up for Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, who's playing well on the season. So looking at it from the Knicks standpoint of that, I think it's a good trade for both sides because both teams are getting something that they desperately need. For Toronto, hitting the reset button, the New York Knicks looking at in terms of modernizing their offense, opening up the game there, getting a little bit better efficiency. They lost Emmanuel quickly, who I thought was playing well for them. So looking at it from that standpoint, but they do get a little bit more shooting, a little bit more spacing on the floor, get another potential point guard with Malachi Flynn, Precious Achiuwa being a big, being able to fill that void next to Hartenstein and stuff like that. So I think it's a trade that works for both teams. And it's not something that desperately moves the needle for the New York Knicks, but it's something that can get a little bit more functionality in their offense. And I think that's something that they can desperately need and move on from the inefficiencies of RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett now has a chance to grow in Toronto, no expectations, just grow as a secondary option, especially because Scotty Barnes is taking off, in my opinion. So looking at it from that standpoint, and maybe the Knicks realize after signing Taj Gibson, we can't depend on Taj Gibson at this stage at 38 years old to continue to play and fill that void. So maybe that was another thing that Tibbs was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me right now at this stage of his career and stuff like that. So looking at it from that standpoint, I like the trade for both sides because at least it gives them some type of clear direction of where they're going to go forward. Looks like OG Anunoby is going to be signed there as well. So looking at it from that standpoint, I like it for both teams. Does it move the needle for the New York Knicks? I don't necessarily think so, especially not this season. But potentially looking down the line, maybe this is a way that they can potentially move off Julius Randle if they choose to do so. He's been playing all right so far. And get these contracts like Evan Fournier. He hasn't played for y'all. Trade him. Figure out what to do with him, New York. But I overall like the trade for both teams. I don't think this moves the New York Knicks in particular. Maybe they go overshoot Orlando, who's been playing really well so far this season. And maybe this is a trigger for other teams to make other moves. Maybe Orlando can make some moves there with Wendell Carter, Cole Anthony. Maybe they make a move now, seeing how that moves out in the Eastern Conference. Cleveland, maybe this forces them to now realize, hey, we're not going to be able to trade him to New York. Maybe we move Donovan Mitchell to Miami. Maybe there's a potential spot there for him. Brooklyn, maybe they move him in that direction there. So maybe this triggers some other trades that are around the league. I know some other guys are eligible in January. So it's definitely going to be getting interesting in the new year as we are entering the new year. So winding down here. Thank you for joining me as always. Hope everyone has a good new year. Stay safe, especially. And we'll pick it up in the new season. We continue to talk basketball. Check out Ring Takes, where things are picking up. Day 1 is happening tomorrow night. The Royal Rumble's approaching, so we've been talking about that. But thank you guys for joining me. Thank you guys for showing support on the channel on Twitch. I'm starting on Twitch, so check out Twitch as well. And just continue to support the channel. Continue to look at the shorts. Continue to look at the page, the videos I'm putting out, and check out the podcast on Spotify. I'm going to be uploading on YouTube as well. But thank you guys for joining me, and until next time.